The rain came down in sheets, hammering the tin roof of the old manor like 1,000 tiny fists. The air inside was thick with the smell of damp wood and something sharper, metallic, that clung to the back of the throat. The house sat on the edge of Blackthorn Hollow, a forgotten speck of a town where the forest seemed to lean in too close, whispering secrets to anyone who'd listen. The manor itself was a relic, its grey stone walls crumbling under decades of neglect, windows like empty eyes staring out at the storm. Inside, the 5 of them were gathered in the dining hall, their voices barely rising above the howl of the wind. They didn't know it yet, but this was the last night any of them would draw breath, except for the dog. Clara sat at the head of the long oak table, her fingers tracing the rim of a chipped teacup. She was 42, with sharp cheekbones and sharper eyes, the kind that could cut through lies without blinking. She'd inherited the manor from her father, a man whose name still made the locals flinch. He'd been a recluse, hoarding secrets and grudges until a heart attack took him last spring. Clara had come to sell the place, to wash her hands of his legacy, but the others had followed, each with their own reasons, none of them pure. She glanced at the group, her lips tight. "We shouldn't be here," she said, her voice low but firm. "This house, it's wrong." Across from her, Marcus slouched in his chair, his boots propped on the table. He was 30, all lean muscle and careless charm, with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. He'd been her father's assistant, the one who'd handled the old man's affairs when his mind started to slip. Marcus had a knack for finding things, documents, artifacts, truths people wanted buried. He twirled a pocket knife between his fingers, the blade catching the flicker of the chandelier above. "Relax, Clara," he said, his voice smooth as whiskey. "It's just a house, and we're just here to settle the estate. No ghosts, no curses, just paperwork and profit." Next to him, Elise shifted uncomfortably, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She was 25 with mousy brown hair and wide, nervous eyes that darted to the windows every time the thunder rolled. She'd been the old man's nurse in his final months, tending to his rages and his ramblings. Clara didn't trust her. She was too quiet, too eager to please, like someone hiding a knife behind their back. Elise's voice was barely a whisper. "He used to talk about this place," she said it held things we shouldn't touch. "Oh, come on," laughed Victor, leaning forward. He was the oldest, pushing 50, with a barrel chest and a beard streaked with gray. A lawyer by trade, he'd managed the old man's legal affairs, twisting loopholes to keep the estate intact. His laugh was loud, forced, like he was trying to drown out the storm. The old bastard was half mad, talking about curses and hidden rooms. "You're all letting this place get to you. It's just stone and wood." The 5th was Lila, perched on the edge of her chair like she might bolt at any moment. She was 33, with a tangle of black curls and a restless energy that made her seem younger. A journalist, she'd been sniffing around the old man's story for years, chasing rumors of his shady deals and darker secrets. She'd wormed her way into this gathering, claiming she was here to document the estate's closure. Her notebook lay open on the table, filled with scribbled notes and cryptic symbols. "It's not just stone and wood," she said, her voice sharp. "You all know what he was into. The artifacts, the rituals. This house was his obsession. We're here to divide the assets and leave. That's it." But her words felt hollow, even to her. The manor had a weight, a presence that pressed against her skin. She'd felt it the moment she'd stepped inside, a sense that something was watching. "Wait," she shook it off, blaming the storm and the late hour. The others fell silent, their faces lit by the flickering candles. The power had gone out an hour ago, leaving them in a pool of dim light, shadows crawling up the wall. Outside, the dog barked, a low guttural sound that cut through the rain. He was a scruffy mutt, a stray the old man had taken in years ago, named Rusty, for his reddish fur. He'd been pacing the grounds all evening, refusing to come inside despite the storm. Clara had tried coaxing him, but he'd bared his teeth, his eyes wild, like he knew something she didn't. Now his barks grew sharper, more urgent, coming from somewhere near the back of the house. Marcus sighed, tossing his knife onto the table. Someone should check on that damn dog before he wakes the whole county. I'll go, Elise said quickly, standing, too quickly, Clara thought, watching her. Elise grabbed a flashlight from the table and slipped out of the room, her footsteps echoing down the hall. The others sat in silence, the air growing heavier with each passing minute. Clara's gaze flicked to the windows where the rain streaked like tears. She couldn't shake the feeling that the house was listening, its walls soaking up their words, their fears. Elise didn't come back. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Victor drummed his fingers on the table, his earlier bravado fading. She's probably just lost, he muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. Lila closed her notebook, her face pale. We should look for her, she said. Marcus snorted, but he was already on his feet, grabbing the flashlight. Elise had left behind. Clara stood too, her heart thudding. We stay together, she said. No one argued. They moved through the manor, their footsteps muffled by the threadbare rugs. The house was a maze of narrow halls and locked doors, its layout defying logic. Rooms led to rooms that shouldn't exist, corridors twisting back on themselves. The air grew colder as they descended a staircase to the lower level, where the old man had kept his stud. Rusty's barks were louder now, coming from beyond a heavy oak door at the end of the hall. Clara's hand hesitated on the knob, a chill crawling up her spine. She pushed it open. The study was a cavern of shadows, its walls lined with shelves of leather-bound books and strange artifacts, carved stones, glass vials, things that glinted in the flashlight's beam. In the center was a desk, its surface cluttered with papers and a single photograph. The old man, younger, standing in front of the manor, with a smile that didn't match his eyes. Rusty stood in the corner, hackles raised, growling at the far wall. There was no sign of Elise. Elise, Clara called, her voice echoing. Nothing. Marcus swept the flashlight around, revealing a door behind the desk, half hidden by a bookcase. It was ajar, just enough to show a sliver of darkness. Beyond, Lila stepped forward, her eyes wide. That wasn't in the floor plans, she whispered. Victor's face was ashen. We need to find her, and get out, now. They pushed the door open, revealing a stone staircase descending into blackness. The air that wafted up was damp, sour, like something long buried. Rusty's growls turned to whimpers, but he stayed close, his eyes fixed on the dark. Clara's heart pounded as she took the first step, the others following. The stairs seemed to go on forever, spiraling down into the earth. The walls were rough, carved with symbols that made her skin crawl, loops and angles that didn't belong to any language she knew. At the bottom was a chamber, vast and cold, its walls slick with moisture. In the center stood a stone altar, stained dark with something that wasn't water, and there, slumped against it, was Elise. Her eyes were open, staring at nothing, her throat slashed so deep. It was a miracle. Her head was still attached. Blood pooled beneath her, thick and black in the flashlight's beam. Lila screamed, stumbling back. Victor swore, his voice shaking. Marcus froze, his usual smirk gone. Clara's knees buckled, but she forced herself to stay upright, her mind racing. Rusty whined, pressing against her leg, his fur bristling. The air in the chamber was wrong, heavy with a presence that made her want to run. The symbols on the walls seemed to pulse, or maybe that was just the flicker of the flashlight. We need to go, Clara said, her voice barely steady. Now. But as they turned to leave, the door at the top of the stairs slammed shut with a sound like a gunshot. The flashlight flickered, then died, plunging them into darkness. Rusty's growl filled the void, low and fierce, as something in the chamber began to move. The darkness was absolute, a suffocating blanket that pressed against their eyes, their lungs, their sanity. Clara's breath came in shallow gasps, her hand gripping Rusty's collar, as his growls vibrated through her fingers. The air in the chamber was thick, not just with the damp rot of underground stone, but with something else. An electric hum, like the moment before a lightning strike. The sound of the door slamming still echoed in her ears, a deliberate act that felt less like an accident, and more like a trap snapping shut. Behind her, Lila's breathing was ragged, punctuated by small stifled sobs. Victor's voice cut through, hoarse and unsteady. The flashlight. Marcus, get it working. I'm trying. Marcus snapped, his usual swagger replaced by a tremor of panic. The click of the flashlight switch was futile, each press yielding nothing but silence. Clara's free hand fumbled in her pocket, finding her phone. She swiped it on, the weak glow barely cutting through the black. It illuminated their faces in harsh angles. Lila's tear-streaked cheeks, Victor's wide eyes, Marcus clutching the useless flashlight like a lifeline. The light didn't reach far, but it was enough to show Elise's body still slumped against the altar, her blood a dark mirror, reflecting the phone's glow. We can't stay here, Clara said, forcing her voice to steady. She didn't look at Elise again. The sight was a weight she couldn't carry. Rusty tugged against her grip, his growls deepening, his body angled toward the far wall, where the shadows seemed to writhe. Something's wrong with this place, she added, though the words felt redundant. They all felt it. The chamber wasn't just a room, it was alive, or something in it was. Victor pushed past her, his bulk brushing against the altar, as he stumbled toward the stairs. We need to get that door open. Now, his voice cracked on the last word, betraying the bravado he'd worn like armor upstairs. Clara followed, pulling Rusty along, the dog's claws scraping against the stone floor. Lila hesitated, her eyes locked on Elise's body, until Marcus grabbed her arm. Move, he hissed, dragging her toward the stair. The staircase was narrower than Clara remembered, the walls closing in as they climbed. Her phone's light flickered, the battery draining faster than it should. Each step felt heavier, like the air itself was pushing back. Rusty's growls turned to sharp barks, echoing in the tight space. At the top, Victor threw his shoulder against the door. It didn't budge. He tried again, grunting with effort, but the wood held fast, as if sealed by something stronger than a lock. It stuck. He panted, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cold. Stuck. Lila's voice was shrill, teetering on hysteria. It slammed shut. Someone's out there. She spun, her eyes darting to the shadows behind them, as if expecting a figure to emerge. Clara tightened her grip on Rusty, her mind racing. The manor was empty, or it was supposed to be. They'd locked the doors, checked the windows. No one else could be here, could they? Marcus shoved Victor aside and examined the door, running his hands along the edges. No lock, no bolt, he muttered. It's like it's welded. He pounded on it, the sound dull and swallowed by the stone walls. Clara held her phone higher, the light catching strange carvings on the doorframe. More of those unnatural symbols, loops and jagged lines that seemed to shift when she stared too long. Her stomach twisted. These weren't here before, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. What? Victor snapped, turning to look. His face paled as he saw them, his hand reaching out as if to touch the carvings, then stopping short. What the hell are those? Lila's voice was a whimper. They're the same as the ones downstairs on the walls, around the altar. She clutched her notebook, her knuckles white. I told you this place is wrong. Your father, he was into something dark. I saw his notes, his rituals, sacrifices. Shut up, Marcus cut her off, his voice sharp but unsteady. We don't need your ghost stories. We need to get out. But his eyes lingered on the symbols, and Clara saw the doubt creeping in. She felt it too. Her father had always been a private man, his study off limits, his late-night mutterings dismissed as eccentricity. But now, standing in this suffocating darkness, she wondered how much she'd never known. Rusty's barks grew frantic, his body straining toward the stairs they just climbed. Clara's phone flickered again, the battery now at 10%. We can't stay here, she said, echoing her earlier words, but with more urgency. There's got to be another way out. She didn't want to go back down to the chamber, to Elise's body, to that altar that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. But the door wasn't giving, and the air was growing colder, the hum in her ears louder.
Victor nodded, wiping his brow. Back to the stud. There might be another exit. A window. Something. No one argued, though Lila's eyes were wide with terror. They descended the stairs, slower this time, the darkness pressing closer. Rusty stayed at Clara's side, his warmth the only thing keeping her grounded. The chamber was as they'd left it. Elise's body still slumped, the altar gleaming wetly in the phone's fading light. Clara forced herself to look away, scanning the walls for any sign of another door, a vent, anything. Marcus moved to the altar, his hand shaking as he pushed aside papers and artifacts scattered on its surface. "There's got to be something here," he muttered, almost to himself. He lifted a small carved stone, its surface etched with more symbol. As he did, the ground trembled, a low, deep rumble that made Clara's teeth ache. Rusty yelped, backing away, his ears flat. Lila screamed, dropping her notebook, pages scattering across the floor. "What was that?" she cried. Victor grabbed the stone from Marcus and hurled it against the wall, where it shattered into fragments. "Stop touching things," he roared, his voice breaking. The rumble faded, but the air felt heavier, the hum now a steady pulse that Clara felt in her chest. Her phone died, plunging them into darkness again. Lila's sobs filled the silence, and Rusty's growls were a low, constant warning. Then a sound, faint at first, but growing louder. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from the far side of the chamber. Clara's heart stopped. They weren't alone. She fumbled for Rusty, her hands shaking as she pulled him close. "Who's there?" she called, her voice cracking. No answer, only the footsteps, closer now, heavy and unhurried. Marcus swore under his breath, backing away from the altar. Victor stood frozen, his breath loud in the dark. The footsteps stopped, and for a moment, there was only silence. Then Lila screamed, a sound cut short by a wet, choking gurgle. Clara's hands tightened on Rusty, her mind blank with terror. The dog lunged forward, barking wildly, his teeth bared at something she couldn't see. A thud, heavy and final, echoed in the chamber, and Lila's scream stopped. Clara's breath caught, as she realized what it meant. Another body, another death. "Run!" Victor shouted, his voice raw. Clara didn't need to be told twice. She dragged Rusty with her, stumbling toward the stairs, Marcus close behind. Victor's footsteps were heavy, lagging, and then they stopped. A sickening crack split the air, followed by a heavy slump. Clara didn't look back. She could. Her legs burned as she climbed, Rusty's barks echoing in her ears, the darkness swallowing everything. At the top, the door was still shut, unyielding. Clara pounded on it, her fists bruising, her screams hoarse. Marcus was beside her, his breathing ragged, his hands clawing at the wood. "It won't open," he gasped. "It won't." His words cut off with a strangled cry, and Clara felt him fall, his body hitting the floor with a dull thud. She was alone now, except for Rusty, whose growls were the only sound left in the dark. The hum was everywhere, vibrating through the walls, through her bones. The symbols on the door seemed to glow faintly, or maybe her eyes were playing tricks. Rusty pressed against her, trembling, but fierce, his teeth bared at the darkness below. Clara's hands shook as she touched the door again, feeling the carvings under her fingers. They were warm, pulsing, alive, and then with a groan like the house itself was exhaling, the door swung open. Clara stumbled into the study, Rusty at her heels, and slammed the door behind her. The air was lighter here, but the hum lingered, fainter now, like a heartbeat slowing. She collapsed against the desk, her chest heaving, her mind a blur of fear and loss. Elise, Lila, Victor, Marcus, all gone. Only she and Rusty remained. The dog whined, nudging her hand, his eyes fixed on the door they'd just escaped. Outside, the storm raged on, but the manor was silent, save for the faint hum that never quite faded. Clara knew they weren't safe. Not yet. The house wasn't done with them.
Clara's hand trembled as she gripped the edge of the desk, her knuckles white against the dark wood. The study was a tomb of shadows, the candlelight from earlier long extinguished, leaving only the faint glow of moonlight seeping through a cracked window. Rusty stood rigid at her side, his fur bristling, his low growl a constant warning. The door to the chamber was shut behind them, but the hum persisted, a faint vibration that crawled under her skin, like the house itself was breathing. She could still hear the echoes of Lila's scream, Victor's final crack, Marcus's choked cry. Her chest tightened, her breath shallow. She was alone now, except for Rusty, and the weight of that truth was a stone in her gut. She forced herself to stand, her legs unsteady, and scanned the room. The study was as they'd left it, bookshelves sagging under dusty tomes, artifacts glinting in the dim light. The photograph of her father staring from the desk. His smile in the image felt mocking now, as if he'd known this night would come. Clara's eyes lingered on it, a flicker of anger cutting through her fear. What had he done here? What had he brought into this house? She pushed the thought down, focusing on survival. She needed a way out, a weapon, anything to keep whatever was in that chamber from coming for her next. Rusty's growl sharpened, his head snapping toward the window. Clara followed his gaze, her heart lurching. The glass was fogged, streaked with rain, but beyond it, something moved. A shadow too tall, too wrong to be human. It lingered for a moment, then vanished, leaving only the patter of rain and the howl of the wind. Clara's stomach churned. The manor was surrounded by dense forest, miles from the nearest town. No one was out there. No one should be. She grabbed a heavy brass candlestick from the desk, its weight cold and reassuring in her hand. "Stay close," she whispered to Rusty, her voice barely audible. The dog pressed against her leg, his eyes fixed on the door to the chamber. She moved toward the window, her steps slow, deliberate. The floorboards creaked underfoot, each sound like a gunshot in the silence. The window was old, its frame warped, the latch rusted. She tugged at it, but it wouldn't budge. Her phone was dead, the flashlight gone, and the storm had killed the power hours ago. Trapped, the word echoed in her mind, cold and final. She glanced back at the chamber door, half expecting it to swing open, to reveal whatever had taken the others, but it stayed shut, the symbols carved into its frame, seeming to pulse in the moonlight. Rusty's growl turned to a sharp bark, his body tensing. Clara spun, her grip tightening on the candlestick. The air in the room shifted, growing colder, heavier, as if something had slipped inside. Her eyes darted to the corners, where the shadows seemed to deepen, pooling like ink. "Who's there?" she called, her voice cracking. No answer, but the hum grew louder, a low drone that made her teeth ache. Rusty's barks grew frantic, his teeth bared at the far wall, where the bookcase stood, its shelves cluttered with her father's artifact. Clara's gaze locked on the bookcase. It was massive, floor to ceiling, its wood blackened with age. She hadn't noticed before, but the symbols from the chamber were here too, etched faintly along the edges, almost hidden by the grain of the wood. Her heart pounded as she approached, the candlestick raised. Rusty stayed at her side, his growls a steady rhythm. She reached out, her fingers brushing the carvings. They were warm, like the door downstairs, and the hum spiked, a jolt that made her pull back. The bookcase shifted slightly, a faint click, echoing in the silence. She froze, her breath catching. The bookcase moved again, inching forward, revealing a sliver of darkness behind it, a hidden passage. Her mind raced. Another way out, or another trap. She didn't have time to decide. Rusty's barks turned to a snarl, and she heard it again. Those footsteps, slow and heavy, coming from the chamber below. The door rattled, a low groan of wood and metal, as if something was testing it. Clara's pulse thundered in her ear. She grabbed the bookcase and pulled, muscles straining, until it swung open enough to slip through. The passage was narrow, its walls rough stone, the air thick with the smell of earth and decay. Rusty hesitated, his ears flat, but Clara tugged him forward, her hand shaking on his collar. The candlestick was her only weapon, its weight a small comfort. As she stepped into the dark, the passage sloped downward, the floor uneven, forcing her to move slowly. The hum followed, fainter now but ever present,
like a heartbeat in the wall. Behind her, the bookcase clicked shut, sealing them in. She didn't look back. The passage twisted, its walls closing in, the symbols carved into them glowing faintly in the dark. Clara's eyes adjusted, catching glimpses of the etching spirals, jagged lines, shapes that made her head hurt to look at. Her father's obsession, Lila had said, rituals, sacrifices. Clara's stomach twisted. She dismissed the rumors about her father, the whispers of cults, and forbidden knowledge. He was just a strange old man, she'd told herself, but now, with the blood of 4 people staining the manor, she wasn't so sure. Rusty's growls softened, his body still tense but his focus shifted. The passage opened into a small room, its walls lined with shelves, like the study above, but these shelves held no books, only artifacts, dozens of them, glinting in the faint light that seemed to come from nowhere. Stones carved with symbols, vials of dark liquid, a dagger with a hilt shaped like a snarling beast. In the center was a pedestal, and on it, a single object, a small black orb, its surface smooth and reflective, like polished obsidian. The hum was loudest here, a pulse that vibrated through Clara's bones. She approached the pedestal, drawn to the orb. Despite herself, it was beautiful, in a way, but wrong, like a star that burned cold. Rusty whined, nudging her leg, urging her back. She reached out, her fingers hovering over the orb, the hum now a roar in her ears. Her father's voice echoed in her mind, a memory from years ago. Some things are better left untouched, Clara. Some doors don't open both ways. She pulled her hand back, her heart racing. Whatever this was, it was the heart of the manor's wrongness. A sound behind her, a low, wet rasp, like air escaping a punctured lung. Clara spun, the candlestick raised, but the room was empty. Rusty's hackles were up, his teeth bared at the shadows. The rasp came again, closer, from the passage they'd just left. Clara backed away, her eyes darting to the orb, then to the shelves. She grabbed the dagger, its hilt cold and heavy, and tucked it into her belt. The candlestick was too heavy to carry with it, so she set it down, her hands shaking. "Come on, boy," she whispered to Rusty, her voice barely steady. The passage continued beyond the room, narrower now, the air colder. Clara moved faster, the rasp growing louder behind her, joined by a faint shuffle, like something dragging itself along the stone. Rusty's growls were constant, his body pressed against her leg. The passage twisted again, and she stumbled into another chamber, smaller than the last. The walls were bare save for a single door, iron, and rusted, with no handle, only a keyhole. The symbols were everywhere now, covering the walls, the floor, even the door glowing faintly like embers. Clara's breath hitched. No key, no way out. The rasp was closer, the shuffle heavier, and now there was a smell rotten, metallic like blood and decay. Rusty's growls turned to barks, sharp and desperate, as he faced the passage. Clara's hands fumbled at the door, searching for a latch, a lever, anything. Her fingers brushed the keyhole, and the dagger in her belt grew warm, almost burnt. She pulled it out, staring at its blade, which gleamed despite the lack of light. The symbols on its hilt matched those on the door. She hesitated, her heart pounding. The rasp was right behind her now, the air thick with that foul smell. Rusty's barks were frantic, his body trembling. Clara jammed the dagger into the keyhole, twisting it with all her strength. The door groaned, then swung inward, revealing a tunnel that stretched into darkness. She grabbed Rusty and dove through, slamming the door behind her. The rasp stopped, cut off by the iron, but the hum remained, steady and relentless. The tunnel was cold, the air damp, the walls slick with moss. Clara ran, Rusty at her side, the dagger clutched in her hand. The manor wasn't done with her. She could feel it, watching, waiting. But she was still alive, and so was Rusty. That had to count for something. The tunnel stretched on, a claustrophobic vein of stone that seemed to pulse with the manor's unnatural hum. Clara's breath rasped in her throat, her legs burning as she ran. The dagger's weight, a cold anchor in her hand. Rusty kept pace, his claws scraping the slick floor, his growls low and steady, like a warning to whatever lurked behind them. The air was thick with damp and decay, the walls so close they brushed her shoulders, the symbols carved into them glowing faintly, their eerie light guiding her forward. Her mind was a tangle of fear and questions about the manor, her father, the orb, the thing that had taken the others, but there was no time for answers, only running. The tunnel sloped upward, the air growing colder, sharper, as if they were climbing toward the surface. Clara's heart leapt at the thought. Maybe this was the way out, a path to escape the manor's grip, but the hum was still there, vibrating through the stone, through her bones, a reminder that the house wasn't letting go so easily. Rusty's growls spiked, his ears flattening as he glanced back. Clara didn't dare look. The memory of that wet rasp, the shuffle of something dragging itself through the dark, was enough to keep her moving. The tunnel ended abruptly at a wooden trapdoor set into the ceiling, its surface weathered but solid, carved with the same symbols that haunted every corner of this place. Clara skidded to a stop, her chest heaving, and reached up, her fingers brushing the rough wood. It was heavy, unyielding, but there was a faint seam around its edges, a promise of freedom. She pushed, her arms straining, but it didn't budge. Rusty whined, pacing beneath her, his eyes darting to the tunnel behind them. The rasp was back, fainter but growing, a slow, deliberate approach that made her skin crawl. "Come on," she muttered, shoving harder, her shoulder aching as she threw her weight against the trapdoor. The dagger in her hand felt warm again, its hilt pulsing faintly as if responding to the symbols above. She hesitated, then pressed the blade's tip to the carvings, tracing their lines. A low click echoed, and the trapdoor shifted, just enough for her to wedge her fingers under it. With a grunt, she pushed it open, a rush of cold air hitting her face. She climbed through, pulling Rusty up behind her, and slammed the trapdoor shut, the sound swallowed by the hum. They were in the manor's attic, a vast cluttered space, under the slanted roof, lit by slivers of moonlight through broken shingles. The air was stale, thick with dust and the faint tang of mold. Trunks and crates were piled haphazardly, their contents spilling out. Old clothes, yellowed papers, strange tools that glinted in the dim light. Clara's eyes scanned the room, searching for a way out. A small round window sat at the far end, its glass cracked but intact. Beyond it, the storm still raged, lighting flashing across the forest outside. She moved toward the window, her steps cautious, the floorboards creaking underfoot. Rusty stayed close, his nose twitching, his growls softer now but still present. The hum was fainter here, but it hadn't stopped, a constant pulse that made her head ache. She reached the window and tugged at its frame, her heart sinking as it refused to open. The latch was rusted shut, the wood swollen from years of She glanced back at the trapdoor, half expecting it to burst open, but it stayed shut, the symbols on its surface glowing faintly. Clara set the dagger down and grabbed a rusted crowbar from a nearby crate, using it to pry at the window. The metal groaned, but the latch held. She cursed under her breath, her hand shaking. Rusty's growls grew sharper, his body tensing as he faced the trapdoor. The rasp was louder now, closer, coming from below. Clara's stomach twisted. She swung the crowbar harder, the window's frame splintered. One more hit, and the latch gave way, the window swinging open with a screech. Rain poured in, cold and sharp, but the sight of the forest beyond was a lifeline. She turned to Rusty, ready to lift him through, but a sound stopped her, a low guttural chuckle, not from the trapdoor, but from the shadows behind the crates. Her blood ran cold. She grabbed the dagger, clutching it tightly, and backed toward the window. "Who's?" she called, her voice trembling, but defiant. The chuckle came again, closer, accompanied by a faint scrape, like nails on wood. Rusty's barks were frantic now, his teeth bared at the darkness. A figure stepped into the moonlight, tall and thin, its movements jerky, unnatural. It wasn't human, not anymore. Its face was a ruin, skin gray and stretched tight over bone, eyes sunken, and glowing with a faint, sickly light. The symbols from the walls were carved into its flesh, pulsing in time with the hum. Clara's breath caught, her mind screaming at her to run. But her legs wouldn't move. The thing tilted its head, its mouth splitting into a grin that was too wide, too wrong. Clara, it rasped, her name a mockery in its throat. Rusty lunged, his jaws snapping, but the thing moved faster, its hand lashing out with inhuman speed. The dog yelped, tumbling back, blood matting his fur. Clara screamed, swinging the crowbar, but the thing caught it mid-air, wrenching it from her grasp. It tossed the crowbar aside, its glowing eyes fixed on her. "You can't leave," it said, its voice a chorus of whispers, layered and wrong. "The house wants you, he wants you." The dagger was still in her hand, its blade gleaming in the moonlight. She slashed at the thing, the blade slicing through its arm, but no blood came, only a puff of black dust like ash. The thing laughed, unfazed, and stepped close. Clara's mind raced, her father's words echoing again. Some doors don't open both ways. She didn't know what this thing was or what her father had done, but she knew she couldn't fight it. Not here, not like this. She grabbed Rusty, ignoring his pained whimper, and threw herself through the window. The fall was short but brutal, her body hitting the wet grass outside, the air knocked from her lungs. Rain pounded her face as she struggled to her feet, Rusty staggering beside her. The manor loomed above its windows, dark, its walls seeming to lean inward, as if reluctant to let her go. The thing's chuckle echoed from the attic, followed by the scrape of its approach. Clara ran, pulling Rusty with her, the forest swallowing them as they flew. The trees were dense, their branches clawing at her skin, but she didn't stop. The hum followed, fainter now, but never gone, a tether tying her to the manor. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to keep moving, had to keep Rusty alive. The dog limped but kept pace, his loyalty fiercer than his pain. The forest seemed endless, the storm relentless, lighting illuminating twisted trees and jagged rocks. Clara's clothes were soaked, her body aching, but she pushed on, the dagger still clutched in her hand. She didn't know if the thing was following, but she felt its presence, a weight in the air, a whisper in the hum. Her father's secrets, his artifacts, the orb, they were all tied to this, to the manor, to the thing that wore death like a mask. She stumbled into a clearing, her breath ragged, and collapsed against a tree. Rusty pressed against her, his fur wet and matted, his eyes scanning the dark. The hum was still there but quieter, as if the manor's grip weakened with distance. Clara's hand tightened on the dagger, its warmth a strange comfort. She didn't know what it was or why it had opened the door, but it was all she had left. Lighting flashed, revealing a path through the trees, faint but clear. Clara stood, her legs shaking, and pulled Rusty close. "We're not done yet," she whispered, her voice steady despite the fear. The manor was behind her, but its shadow stretched far, and she knew it wasn't finished with her. Not yet. She took a step toward the path, Rusty at her side, the storm raging around. The hum lingered, a promise of what waited in the dark.
The forest swallowed Clara and Rusty, its trees a maze of gnarled limbs and shadows that seemed to shift with each flash of lightning. The rain was a relentless curtain, soaking her to the bone, her clothes heavy and clinging as she stumbled along the faint path. The dagger in her hand was slick with water, its warmth pulsing faintly against her palm, a strange anchor in the chaos. Rusty limped beside her, his reddish fur matted with blood and mud, but his eyes were sharp, scanning the dark. The hum was still there, a low thrum in the air, weaker now but persistent, like the manor was whispering her name across the miles. Her mind churned with fragments of the night, Elise's slashed throat, Leela's scream, Victor's crack, Marcus's fall, the thing in the attic with its gray skin and glowing eyes. Her father's secrets were at the heart of it, she was sure. The orb, the symbols, the dagger, they weren't just relics, they were pieces of something bigger, something he'd brought into being, something that had taken the others and now hunted her. She tightened her grip on the dagger, its blade catching the occasional flicker of lightning. It had opened the door in the chamber, unlocked the trapdoor. Maybe it could do more. The path twisted, the ground uneven, roots snaking across it like traps. Clara's boots slipped in the mud, her free hand catching a tree to steady herself. Rusty growled, low and urgent, his ears twitching. She froze, her heart pounding, and listened. The rain was loud, the wind louder, but beneath it was something else, a faint rustle, not the natural sway of branches, but deliberate, measured, like steps shadowing her own. She spun, the dagger raised, but the forest was a wall of black, the lightning revealing nothing but trees. Keep moving, she muttered to herself, pulling Rusty closer. The dog's growls didn't stop, his body tense as he stayed at her side. The path widened, leading to a small clearing, where the trees parted, exposing a sky roiling with storm clouds. In the center stood a stone structure, half ruined, its walls weathered and covered in moss. It looked like a chapel or mausoleum, its arched doorway gaping like a mouth. The symbols were here too, carved into the stone, glowing faintly in the dark. Clara's stomach twisted. The manor's reach extended even here, miles from its walls. She approached cautiously, the dagger warm in her hand, its pulse syncing with the hum. Rusty's growls deepened, his hackles up as he stared at the doorway. The air felt heavier here, charged, like the moment before a storm broke. Clara's eyes darted to the trees behind her, the rustle louder now, closer. Whatever was following her wasn't far. She had no choice. She stepped into the structure, Rusty at her heels, the darkness swallowing them. Inside, the air was cold, the smell of damp stone and old earth thick in her throat. The space was small, its walls lined with niches, each holding a rusted urn or crumbling bones. Clara's breath caught as she realized what it was. Her family's crypt, her father's kin, maybe even his own resting place, if he'd planned that far ahead. The symbols covered every surface, their glow stronger here, casting eerie shadows that danced across the walls. In the center was a stone slab, and on it, another orb, identical to the one in the manor, black and reflective, humming with that same unnatural pulse. Clara's heart raced. She wanted to run, to leave this place, and never look back. But the rustle was at the doorway now, the air growing colder, fouler. Rusty's barks echoed in the small space, his body angled toward the entrance. She backed against the slab, the dagger raised, her eyes locked on the dark. The thing from the attic stepped into view, its gray skin gleaming wetly in the rain, its eyes glowing like embers. Its grin was wider now, splitting its face, revealing teeth that were too long, too sharp. Clara, it rasped, the sound a blade across her nerves. You carry his key. Her hand tightened on the dagger, its warmth almost burning now. Stay back, she said, her voice shaking but firm. The thing laughed, a sound like breaking glass, and stepped closer, its movements jerky, like a puppet on frayed strings. Rusty lunged, his jaws snapping, but the thing swatted him aside with a flick of its hand, sending him crashing into the wall with a yelp. Clara screamed, swinging the dagger, but the thing caught her wrist, its grip cold and unyielding, like iron. The dagger fell, clattering to the stone floor, its glow fading. You can't stop it, the thing said, its voice a chorus of whispers, each one clawing at her mind. He opened the door. You'll finish what he started. It leaned closer, its breath a rancid cloud, its eyes boring into hers. Clara's vision blurred, the hum overwhelming, filling her head with images. Her father chanting in a circle of symbols, blood on an altar, the orb pulsing like a heart. She saw the manor, alive, its walls shifting, its rooms endless, a prison for something ancient, something hungry.
She kicked out, her boot connecting with the thing's leg, but it didn't flinch. Its grip tightened, her wrist bones grinding together. Rusty stirred, his whimpers turning to growls as he struggled to his feet. Clara's eyes darted to the dagger. Inches away, she twisted, throwing her weight against the thing, and managed to break free, diving for the blade. Her fingers closed around it, the warmth flooding back, the hum spiking as she slashed upward, catching the thing across its chest. Black dust poured from the wound, and it staggered, its grin faltering. Clara scrambled to the slab, the orb's hum now a roar in her ears. She didn't know why, but she felt it. The dagger and the orb were linked, pieces of her father's madness. She raised the blade, ready to smash the orb, but the thing lunged, its hand closing around her throat. No, it hissed, its eyes blazing. It's his. It's ours. Clara choked, her vision darkening, but Rusty's sparks cut through, and she felt his teeth sink into the thing's leg. It howled, loosening its grip, just enough for her to swing the dagger again, slicing through its arm. More dust spilled and it stumbled back, its form flickering, like a flame in the wind. She didn't hesitate. She brought the dagger down on the orb, the blade shattering it with a sound like a scream. The hum stopped, the silence deafening, the symbols on the walls fading to nothing. The thing shrieked, its body collapsing into a pile of ash, the glow in its eyes snuffed out. Clara fell to her knees, gasping, the dagger still in her hand, its warmth gone, just cold metal now. Rusty limped to her, nudging her face, his whimpers soft but urgent. The crypt was silent, the air lighter, but Clara's heart still raced. She didn't trust the quiet. She grabbed Rusty, checking his wounds. Blood matted his fur, but he was alive, his eyes bright with defiance. She stood, her legs shaking, and moved to the doorway. The storm was easing, the rain softer, the lighting farther off. The forest stretched out, dark and endless, but the path was still there, leading somewhere, anywhere but here. She stepped outside, Rusty at her side, the dagger tucked into her belt. The manor was miles away, but she felt its shadow, a weight that hadn't lifted. The orb was gone, the thing was ash, but her father's secrets were still out there, buried in the house, in the forest, maybe in her. She didn't know what he'd done, what he'd unleashed, but she knew it wasn't over. The rustle in the trees was gone, but something else watched, waited. Clara took a deep breath, the cold air sharp in her lungs, and started down the path. Rusty stayed close, his limp slowing him, but not stopping him. The manor had taken everyone else, but not them, not yet. She didn't know where the path led, but she kept moving, the dagger a heavy reminder in her belt. The storm was fading, but the darkness wasn't. Something was still out there, and it knew her name. The path through the forest was a faint scar in the undergrowth, barely visible in the pre-dawn gloom. As the storm's last gasps faded into a drizzle, Clara's boots sank into the mud, each step a struggle, her body aching from the night's horrors. The dagger hung heavy at her belt, its blade cold now, no longer pulsing with that eerie warmth. Rusty limped beside her, his fur caked with blood and dirt, but his eyes were alert, scanning the tree. The silence was oppressive, the hum gone, but replaced by a weight in the air, a sense that the forest was holding its breath, watching. Clara's heart hadn't stopped racing, her mind replaying the crypt, the thing's grey face, its glowing eyes, the orb shattering under her dagger. She'd stopped it, or thought she had, but the manor's shadow clung to her, a chill she couldn't shake. The path twisted through dense pines, their branches knitting together overhead, blocking what little light the sky offered. Clara's clothes were soaked, her skin clammy, but she didn't dare stop. The thing in the crypt was gone, reduced to ash, but she didn't trust the quiet. Her father's secrets were woven into this place, his artifacts, his rituals, the symbols that seemed to follow her everywhere. The dagger was proof of that, its hilt still etched with those unnatural carvings. Now dull but no less unsettling, she glanced at it, her fingers brushing the metal, wondering what it was, what it meant. It had opened doors, destroyed the orb. Could it do more? Could it keep her alive? Rusty's low growl pulled her from her thoughts. He'd stopped, his body rigid, ears pricked toward the trees to their left. Clara froze, her hand tightening on the dagger's hilt, her eyes straining against the dark. The forest was still, too still, the drizzle muffling any sound. Then she heard it, a faint snap, like a twig breaking underfoot, deliberate, close. Her breath caught, her pulse hammering in her ears. "Rusty," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The dog's growl deepened, his teeth bared, his body angled toward the sound. She drew the dagger, its weight familiar now, and took a step back, her eyes locked on the trees. Another snap, closer, followed by a low rhythmic thump, like a heartbeat in the earth. The air grew colder, the drizzle turning to mist that curled around the trunks, unnatural and thick. Clara's skin prickled, the memory of the thing in the crypt, flashing in her mind, its jerky movements, its too wide grin. Was it back, or was this something else? Another piece of her father's legacy come to claim her. A shape moved in the mist, tall and indistinct, its edges blurring, as if it didn't fully belong to the world. Clara's heart lurched, but she held her ground, the dagger raised. "Stay back," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. The shape paused, then shifted, resolving into a figure, not the gray-skinned thing from the crypt, but a man, or something like one. He was old, his face lined and weathered, his eyes hidden under the brim of a tattered. His clothes were ragged, patched with mud and leaves, blending into the forest. He carried a staff, its end carved with those same damn symbols. Rusty's growls didn't falter, his body poised to lunge. The man tilted his head, studying her, his expression unreadable. "You're his daughter," his voice low, rough, like gravel underfoot. "Clara." Her blood ran cold. "How do you know my name?" She stepped back, Rusty moving with her, his barks sharp and warning. The man didn't advance, but his presence felt like a weight, pressing against her. "I knew your father," he said, "knew what he was doing, what he woke." He nodded at the dagger. "That's his key. You shouldn't have it." Clara's grip tightened, her mind racing. "What do you know about it?" "About him?" Her voice cracked, anger mixing with fear. "What the hell did he do?" The man's eyes flicked to the dagger, then back to her, and for a moment, she thought she saw something like pity in his face. "He thought he could control it," he said, "thought he could bind it, use it, but it used him, and now, it's after you." She snapped, but she already knew. The thing in the crypt, the hum, the symbols, they were all part of something bigger, something her father had unleashed. The man didn't answer, his gaze shifting to the trees, as if hearing something she could. The thump came again, louder, closer, the mist swirling thicker now, carrying that familiar metallic tang of blood. "Run," the man said, his voice urgent but calm. "The path ends at the river. Cross it. It can't follow you there." He stepped back, his form fading into the mist, the staff symbols glowing faintly before vanishing. Clara didn't wait to question him. She grabbed Rusty's collar and ran, the dagger clutched tight, the path barely visible under the thickening mist. The thump grew louder, joined by that wet rasp she'd heard in the manor, the shuffle of something heavy dragging itself through the trees. The forest seemed to close in, branches snagging her hair, roots tripping her feet. Rusty's barks were frantic, his limp slowing him, but not stopping. Clara's lungs burned, her vision blurring, as the mist stung her eyes. The path sloped downward, the ground growing wetter, the sound of rushing water, cutting through the thump and rasp. The river. She pushed harder, her legs screaming, the dagger's hilt digging into her palm. The trees parted, revealing a narrow, churning river, its waters black and swollen from the storm. A rickety bridge spanned it, its wooden planks slick and rotting. Clara hesitated, the thump now a drumbeat, the rasp so close she could feel its breath on her neck. She glanced back, seeing nothing but mist and shadows. but the air was alive with that presence, heavy and hungry. Rusty whined, nudging her toward the bridge, his eyes wide with fear. But unwavering, she stepped onto the bridge, the planks creaking under her weight, the river roaring below. The dagger pulsed faintly, as if waking, its symbols catching the faint light of dawn creeping through the clouds. Halfway across, the thump stopped, the rasp fading into silence. Clara froze, her heart pounding, waiting for the attack, but nothing came. The mist hung still, the forest quiet, the air lighter, as if a weight had lifted. She looked at Rusty, his growls softening, his ears twitching. "We made it," she whispered, her voice trembling with relief, but the relief was short-lived. The bridge groaned, a low, unnatural sound, and the planks beneath her shifted, as if pushed from below. Clara stumbled, grabbing the rope railing, her eyes darting to the water. Something moved beneath the surface, a shadow too large, too deliberate to be a fish. The dagger burned in her hand, its pulse matching her own. Rusty barked, his body tense, staring at the water. The shadow rose, breaking the surface, a mass of grey flesh and glowing eyes, its grin wide and familiar. Clara screamed, slashing the dagger at the air, but the thing didn't emerge. Instead, the bridge buckled, planks snapping as the shadow thrashed below. She ran, pulling Rusty with her, the bridge swaying wildly. The far bank was close, the path continuing into the forest beyond. She leaped the last few feet, landing hard in the mud, Rusty tumbling beside her. The bridge collapsed behind them, swallowed by the river, the shadow vanishing with it. Clara lay there gasping, the dagger still in her hand, its warmth fading again. Rusty pressed against her, his whimpers soft but alive. The river roared, the mist thinning, the forest silent once more. She stood, her legs shaking, and looked back at the water. Nothing, no shadow, no thing. Just the current rushing past. The man's words echoed, "It can't follow you there." But she didn't believe it, not really. She turned to the path, the dagger heavy at her belt, Rusty at her side. Dawn was breaking, pale light filtering through the trees, but the manor's shadow still clung to her, its secrets unfinished. She didn't know where the path led, but she kept moving, one step at a time. The dog's loyalty her only certainty in the dark.
The dawn light was a frail thing, barely piercing the canopy of the forest. As Clara stumbled along the path, her body heavy with exhaustion and fear, the dagger hung at her belt, its weight a constant reminder of the night's horrors, its blade cold now, the symbols etched into its hilt. Dull in the grey morning, Rusty limped beside her, his fur matted with blood and mud, but his eyes were fierce, his presence a lifeline in the endless trees. The river was behind them, its churning waters a barrier, or so the old man had said, but Clara felt no safety in it. The manor's reach was long, its hum gone but its shadow alive in the air, in the way the forest seemed to watch her every step. Her mind was a storm of fragments, her father's photograph, the orb's shattering scream, the thing in the crypt with its glowing eyes, the old man's cryptic warning. She didn't know who he was, or why he'd appeared, but his words about her father, he thought he could control it, gnawed at her. What had he unleashed? The symbols, the dagger, the orbs, they were pieces of a puzzle she didn't want to solve, but it was too late to turn back. The manor had taken everyone else, and it wanted her too. She tightened her grip on Rusty's collar, the dog's warmth grounding her. They were still alive. That was enough for now. The path grew wider, the trees thinning as the ground sloped upward. Clara's legs burned, her breath ragged, but she pushed on, driven by the need to escape, to find somewhere the manor couldn't reach. The forest was quieter now, the drizzle gone, the air crisp with the scent of pine and earth. Rusty's growls had softened, but his ears stayed pricked, his body tense. She trusted his senses more than her own, his instincts sharper in this unnatural place. The path crested a hill, and Clara stopped, her heart lurching at the sight below. A town lay in the valley, its rooftops barely visible through the morning mist, a cluster of lights flickering like stars. Blackthorn Hollow, She'd forgotten how close it was, the manor's isolation making it feel like another world. Relief flooded her. But it was short-lived. The town was part of her father's legacy too. Its people wary of his name, their whispers of his dark dealings, never far from her mind. She didn't know if she'd find safety there, or answers, or more of the manor's reach. But it was her only chance. She started down the hill, Rusty at her side, the path turning to gravel. As it neared the town's edge, the first buildings came into view. Squat, weathered houses with sagging porches, their windows dark. The streets were empty, the silence heavy, as if the town was holding its breath. Clara's skin prickled, the dagger's weight pulling at her belt. She reached for it, her fingers brushing the hilt, its metal cold but familiar. Rusty's growls returned, low and steady, his eyes fixed on an alley between two houses. A figure stepped out, slow and deliberate, its shape familiar, in a way that made Clara's stomach twist. The old man from the forest, his tattered hat low, his staff tapping the ground, its symbols catching the faint light. "You made it," he said, his voice rough but steady. No trace of surprise. Clara stopped, the dagger half drawn, Rusty's growls sharpening. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice hoarse. "What do you know about my father?" He tilted his head, his eyes shadowed but piercing. "I was his friend, once, before he went too far, before he opened doors he couldn't close." He nodded at the dagger. "That's his key. It binds, and it breaks. You used it well, but it's not done with you." Clara's hand tightened on the hilt, her mind racing. What does it do? What did he do? The old man's face darkened, his staff tapping the ground once. Sharply, he found something old, something that doesn't belong here. Thought he could wield it, bargain with it. The orbs were its eyes, the symbols its voice, the manor was its cage. But you broke one of its eyes, and now it's awake, angry. His gaze flicked to the forest behind her, as if seeing something she couldn't. "It won't stop until it has you." Clara's heart pounded, the memory of the thing in the crypt flashing in her mind. Its grey flesh, its grin, the way it said her name. "How do I stop it?" she asked, her voice trembling but fierce. The old man shook his head. "You don't. You run, or you fight. But it's part of you now. The key chose you." He stepped back, his form fading into the mist, his last words lingering. "Find the second orb. Break it, or it breaks you." She stood frozen, Rusty's growls the only sound in the empty street. The town felt wrong, its silence too deep, its lights too dim. She didn't trust it, didn't trust the old man, but his words rang true. The dagger, the orb, the thing, they were tied to her father's madness. She looked at Rusty, his eyes meeting hers, steady despite his wound. "We're not done yet," she whispered, and he nudged her hand, as if agreeing. The street led to a small square, a church at its center, its steeple leaning slightly, its doors ajar. The symbols were there too, carved into the stone above the entrance, faint but unmistakable. Clara's stomach churned. The manor's reach wasn't just in the forest, it was here, in the town, in the bones of this place. She approached the church, the dagger drawn now, its blade catching the light. Rusty stayed close, his limp more pronounced but his resolve unbroken. Inside the church was dark, its pews empty, the air thick with the smell of wax and dust. A single candle burned at the altar, its flame steady despite the draught. On the altar was the second orb, black and reflective, identical to the one in the crypt. The hum was back, faint but growing, a pulse that matched her heartbeat. Clara's breath caught, her hand shaking on the dagger. She knew what she had to do, but the weight of it, the certainty that this wasn't the end, pressed against her. Rusty growled, his eyes fixed on the shadows behind the altar. The air shifted, growing colder, heavier, that familiar metallic tang, filling her lungs. The thing was here, or something like it, its presence a pressure in the room. Clara stepped forward, the dagger raised, her voice steady despite the fear. "I'm not yours," she said, to the orb, to the thing, to her father's ghost. She brought the dagger down,
the blade slicing through the orb, shattering it with a scream that echoed in her skull. The hum stopped, the air clearing, the candle's flame snuffing out. The church was silent, but Clara felt no relief. She backed away, Rusty at her side, the dagger cold in her hand. The shadows didn't move, but she knew they were watching. The old man's words echoed, "It's part of you now." She didn't know if there were more orbs, more things, more doors her father had opened, but she knew she couldn't stay here. She left the church, the town still silent, its streets empty. The forest loomed beyond, the manor somewhere in its depths, waiting. Clara didn't look back. She walked toward the road out of Blackthorn Hollow, Rusty limping, but alive, his loyalty fiercer than the dark. The dagger was at her belt, its symbols a promise of more to come. The manor had taken everyone else, but she and Rusty had survived. For now that was enough. But the shadow followed, and deep down she knew it always would. Clara and Rusty disappeared into the grey dawn, their silhouettes fading, as the road out of Blackthorn Hollow stretched into the distance. The town lay silent behind them, its secrets buried in the church's shattered orb, and the manor's shadowed halls. The dagger hung heavy at Clara's side, its symbols a quiet warning, a tether to her father's dark legacy. She didn't know if more orbs waited, or if the thing in the shadows would return, but she felt its gaze, patient and relentless. The forest whispered, the air thick with questions unanswered, doors unclosed. Clara kept walking, Rusty's steady presence her only anchor, the dog's survival a defiance of the night's horrors. They were alive, but the manor's reach was long, and its hunger wasn't sated. Somewhere in the dark, it waited for her.